She clutched the tiny velvet box in one hand and her daughter's fingers in the other, her heart pounding as she stepped into the quiet pawn shop. She only wanted enough money to buy baby formula. But when the man behind the counter turned around, her world stopped, because it wasn't just a stranger. It was her former boss, and the father of the child he didn't know existed. The wind sliced through the narrow streets of Boston as Emily Carter pulled her coat tighter around her. It was worn thin at the sleeves, the zipper halfway broken, but it was all she had. Her 2-year-old daughter, Sophie, lay curled against her chest in a sling, sleeping with her tiny hand clutching the collar of Emily's coat. Emily's feet ached from walking for hours, first from the shelter to the employment center, then from the center to every place that might consider hiring someone who hadn't worked in over a year. Her last hope that afternoon was not a job. It was survival. In the pocket of her coat, Emily gripped a small velvet box, the kind given with care, once full of promises. Now it only held desperation. The engagement ring inside was all she had left of a past she rarely allowed herself to think about. A time when she believed in forever, when someone looked her in the eyes and told her she was enough. That man had vanished from her life the moment she told him she was pregnant. She approached a small, old-fashioned jewelry shop tucked between a laundromat and a flower stall. It had golden letters etched into the glass. Grace and Sons. She hesitated at the door, looking at her reflection. Her eyes were tired, lips cracked from the cold, and her hair was pulled into a hurried bun. She looked nothing like the woman who had once worn that ring. The bell above the door gave a soft chime as she stepped inside. The shop was warm, dimly lit, lined with dark oak shelves. A woman in her 50s with elegant silver hair stood behind the counter, polishing a display case. Emily cleared her throat. "Excuse me, do you buy gold?" The woman looked up, her expression unreadable. "Sometimes. Depends on the piece." Emily swallowed and stepped forward, carefully placing the velvet box on the counter and opening it. The ring inside shimmered faintly under the overhead light. White gold, a small diamond, worn but still beautiful. The woman leaned in. "That's a lovely ring. Where did it come from?" "It was a gift," Emily said quietly. I need to sell it." "I wouldn't, but I have a daughter and I need money for formula." The woman's expression softened, but before she could say anything, the front door opened behind Emily. A gust of cold air swept through the shop, and the bell chimed again. Footsteps approached. Emily turned slightly to glance at the newcomer, and froze. Tall, sharply dressed in a charcoal overcoat, with a familiar presence that made the hairs on her neck rise. Nathan Hale, her former boss. The man who once signed her paychecks. The man she hadn't seen in over 2 years. The man who now stood less than 3 feet away, his eyes locked on the ring in the box. "I know that ring," he said, his voice steady but low. "That was my grandmother's design. Custom made." Emily's lips parted, but no sound came out. Sophie stirred slightly in the sling, sensing her mother's tension. Nathan looked at her, truly looked at her. The faintest flicker of recognition crossed his face, followed by something else. Confusion, and then something heavier. Concern? "Emily Carter?" he asked, incredulous. She felt her knees weaken. "Yes," she whispered. And in that moment, her entire past, her shame, her child, and the ring between them collided like a wave breaking against rock. Nathan didn't move at first. He just stood there studying her, as if he was trying to reconcile the woman in front of him with the person he once knew. Emily shifted awkwardly, her fingers tightening on the strap that held Sophie close. The baby stirred again, but didn't wake. The silence stretched until the woman behind the counter gently cleared her throat. "Would you like me to give you a moment?" she asked, eyeing them both with a kind of quiet understanding. Emily opened her mouth to say no, but Nathan beat her to it. "Yes, thank you," he said, his voice measured, though his eyes remained locked on Emily. The woman gave a polite nod and stepped into the back room. As soon as the door clicked shut, Emily exhaled shakily. "This is a coincidence," she said quietly, forcing a small, awkward smile. Nathan raised an eyebrow. "You were trying to sell that ring." "I am," she said, her voice flat, "because I need to feed my daughter." His gaze flicked down to Sophie, still sleeping peacefully against her. For the first time, his expression softened, just slightly. "She's yours?" Emily nodded. "Her name's Sophie." "How old is she?" "2." Nathan blinked once. I didn't know you had a child. I doubt you would have, she replied, a slight edge creeping into her voice. You were my boss, and I got laid off just before I started showing. Something flickered in his eyes. Guilt, maybe. He looked down for a moment, then gestured to the ring. That piece, where did it come from? That's not an ordinary engagement ring. Emily hesitated. It was my fiancé's grandmother's. He gave it to me when we got engaged. I didn't know it was anything special. He left when I told him I was pregnant. I haven't seen him since. Nathan's brows drew together. What was his name? Lucas Martin. Nathan stilled. He looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he stepped back and ran a hand through his hair. I knew him, he said quietly. He interned at my company years ago. We weren't close, but I remember him being talented and selfish. That part checks out, Emily said, trying to keep her voice light, though bitterness edged every word. Nathan took a breath. Come have coffee with me. Let's talk. My car's outside. She flinched slightly. Why? Out of pity? No, he said almost too quickly. Because you worked for me, and I should have known what happened after you left. Because your daughter is innocent in all this. And because I want to understand how you ended up here, in this shop, trying to sell a ring that should have come with a future. Emily hesitated, her pride rising like a wave. But the emptiness in her stomach, and Sophie's, was sharper. She looked down at her daughter, who shifted softly in her sleep. Okay, she said. One coffee. Nathan nodded once. I'll drive. He opened the door for her, and as they stepped outside into the cold evening air, Emily felt something unfamiliar begin to stir. Something that almost felt like hope. The cafe Nathan chose was quiet, tucked into a corner of a cobblestone street far from the rush of downtown. The windows glowed softly with warm amber light, a stark contrast to the cold drizzle that had begun to fall outside. Inside, the place smelled of fresh coffee and cinnamon. Emily sat across from Nathan at a small table in the corner, cradling a cup of tea while Sophie, now awake, clung sleepily to her shoulder. Nathan ordered black coffee but barely touched it. His eyes remained on Emily, but not in the way that made her uncomfortable. It wasn't judgment. It was something else. Thoughtfulness, maybe. Guilt, or curiosity so deep it bordered on personal. You really didn't know what happened to me after the layoffs? Emily asked finally, unable to keep the disbelief out of her voice. Nathan shook his head. No, HR handled the reductions. I signed off on the numbers. But the names, he trailed off. I remember thinking you were a hard worker. Quiet, but good. You used to come in early. I had to, she said, brushing Sophie's hair back from her forehead. I was working 2 jobs even then. The one with you and another cleaning offices overnight. When the layoff notice came, I was just starting to feel sick from the pregnancy. I thought I'd figure it out. Then Lucas left. Nathan sat back slowly. And your family? She let out a soft, humorless laugh. Gone. My mother passed when I was 19. My father, well, he wasn't really in the picture. There was no one to call, no one to help. He glanced at Sophie, who was now quietly munching on the corner of a biscotti he'd ordered for her. She's beautiful. She's everything, Emily said softly. There was a pause. Nathan stirred his coffee absently, then looked at her again. Would you ever want to come back? To Hale & Co.? She asked, startled. To work, not as a handout, he clarified. We're opening a new logistics division. I need someone with your eye for detail. You'd be perfect. Remote, part-time at first, flexible hours, so you can be with her. Salary, benefits, stability. Emily stared at him, too stunned to speak. It sounded impossible, unreal, and yet genuine. Why? She asked. Why would you offer me that? You don't owe me anything. Nathan paused. I know, but maybe I should have seen more. Maybe I've been so caught up in spreadsheets and board meetings that I forgot we're hiring people, not numbers. Emily looked down. Her fingers trembled slightly around the warm mug. I don't want charity. It's not charity, he said firmly. You're good at what you do. This is a job offer, Emily, not a rescue. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked out the rain-flecked window, watching the blurred world pass. For a long time, she'd been surviving day to day, just trying to keep Sophie fed and warm. She hadn't allowed herself to imagine anything more. Now maybe she could. "I'll think about it," she said at last. Nathan nodded. "That's all I ask." When they left the cafe, Nathan insisted on giving them a ride back to the shelter. The rain had picked up. Emily hesitated at first, but Sophie was starting to shiver. She accepted. As the car pulled away from the curb, Emily held her daughter close and looked at Nathan through the dim light. Something had shifted, not just in the circumstances, but in the air between them. Something real, unspoken, and impossible to define. Emily sat at the edge of the cot in the shelter's cramped room, the lights already dim for the night. Sophie was asleep beside her, curled into a warm little ball under the donated blanket. Outside, sirens hummed faintly in the distance, but inside it was quiet, too quiet for Emily's thoughts to rest. Nathan's offer replayed in her mind like a scratch record. Part-time, remote work, flexibility, benefits. It felt like a dream, or a trap, or both. She had grown used to things falling apart just when she let her guard down. So many times she had dared to hope, only for life to pull the ground out from beneath her feet. Could this be different? Could he be different? The next morning, after walking Sophie to the community daycare, Emily found herself hesitating outside a small library that offered computer access to those without it. She clutched a folded paper with login credentials Nathan had given her. A test project awaited her on a secure work platform. "Just to see if the rhythm still fits," he had said. Her fingers trembled as she typed in her name, her heart pounding with every keystroke. She hadn't touched office work in almost 3 years. She was sure she'd forgotten everything. But muscle memory came back faster than she expected. Data entry, formatting, inventory cross-checking. She was slower than she used to be, but not broken. That night, Nathan emailed her a simple message. "Well done." "More?" And she wrote back, "Yes, please." The days that followed began to stretch into a different kind of rhythm. Mornings started at the shelter, followed by daycare drop-off and afternoons at the library. She'd work until her eyes burned, then pick up Sophie and return to the same cot, the same thin sheets. But something was different now. There was purpose. There was dignity. One afternoon, as Emily clicked through invoices, a call came in from an unknown number. She almost didn't answer. But when she did, Nathan's voice came through, warm and direct. "I wanted to ask, how would you feel about moving into one of the company's short-term housing units? Just until you're on your feet. It's fully furnished, secure, closer to daycare." Emily's stomach knotted. "Nathan, that's a lot. I can't pay for that. I'm not asking you to. It's a company asset. We've put interns and visiting execs in those units for years. You're an employee. You deserve to live somewhere you can actually rest." She bit her lip. "Why are you doing this?" There was a pause on his end. "Because I can. Because you're working hard. And because Sophie deserves to sleep in a bed that's hers." A few days later, Emily stood in the middle of a small, sunlit apartment on the 3rd floor of a quiet building. There were clean sheets, fresh towels, a kitchen stocked with groceries, and a pink toddler bed already set up beside hers. She sank into the sofa, overwhelmed. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was trespassing in someone else's life. That night, Sophie slept soundly, and Emily watched her chest rise and fall in steady rhythm. A sense of safety settled into the room like a warm blanket. She whispered into the silence, "Maybe we're going to be okay." And for the first time in a long time, she believed it. Emily adjusted the collar of her blouse nervously as she stood in front of the large glass doors of Hale & Co.'s downtown office. It had been 3 years since she last walked into a corporate building wearing anything other than a janitor's uniform or balancing a baby on her hip. Now, her fingers clutched a leather-bound notepad Nathan had sent over with her new employee badge tucked inside. This wasn't just remote work anymore. Nathan had invited her to sit in on a planning session. Something small, he'd said, just a brainstorming session. But Emily knew better. This was a test, a chance, a door. She stepped inside. The front desk receptionist greeted her with a confused but polite smile. "Can I help you?" "I'm Emily Carter. I'm here for the operations meeting. Mr. Hale invited me." The woman checked her screen, blinked, and nodded. "Of course. He's expecting you. Elevator to the 14th floor." Inside the glass elevator, Emily watched the city fall away beneath her. Her palms were sweating. Sophie was at daycare, tucked into a world of toys and story time. Emily was in heels again, for the first time since her baby shower. She swallowed hard. When the elevator doors opened, Nathan was already waiting in the hallway. He looked casual but sharp. No tie, sleeves rolled to the elbows, hands in his pockets. His face lit up when he saw her. "Right on time," he said. "You look great, Emily." She offered a shaky smile. "You say that like I haven't been surviving on secondhand sweaters and shelter coffee." "You've come a long way." He gestured her toward the conference room. There were only 5 people inside, department heads by the look of them. All of them turned when she entered. Emily recognized 2 from her old days. Neither offered more than a polite nod. Nathan introduced her simply. "Emily's here as a consultant on the new logistics systems. She's got experience from the field and perspective we need." She felt their skepticism immediately, but she sat down, straightened her notepad, and did what she had always done best. Listened. For the first 30 minutes, she didn't say a word. She absorbed everything. The proposed workflows, the warehouse limitations, the digital integrations. When the room finally paused and someone muttered, "It's just not scalable," Emily's voice broke the silence. "What if the shipment batching was reversed? You'd save man-hours on both sides and reduce back-end loss by at least 10%. There was silence. Then the woman across the table, Rachel, head of distribution, slowly nodded. "Actually, that would work. Why didn't we think of that?" Nathan smiled but didn't say a word. He didn't have to. The meeting went on another hour, and Emily spoke 3 more times. Each time she offered small but precise insights. Not fancy theories. Real, on-the-ground understanding. The kind that only comes from being in the trenches. Afterward, as the others filtered out, Nathan lingered. "You were brilliant," he said quietly. "I was terrified." He chuckled. "Good. That means you cared." She started to gather her things but paused. "Do they all know? About me? The shelter, Sophie, the ring?" "No," he said. "Only that you're someone I believe in." She met his eyes, and for the first time, she didn't see him as her old boss or a man in a suit. She saw someone who had chosen not to look away. He walked her out, but not before slipping a small note into her hand. Back in the elevator, she unfolded it. In Nathan's neat handwriting, it read, "You're not starting over. You're building forward." She pressed it to her chest and closed her eyes. And for the first time, the future didn't seem like a threat. It felt like a promise. The following weeks passed like chapters in a book Emily never expected to write. Each morning began with the smell of real coffee from her own kitchen. Sophie now had her own space filled with soft toys and bedtime stories, and Emily had a desk by the window where she could work while the sun painted the walls golden. Nathan stayed in touch, though not constantly. He sent emails to check on her progress, offered guidance when she hit roadblocks in the systems, and sometimes sent Sophie little gifts: a stuffed giraffe, a set of picture books, a small wooden puzzle. Each arrived with a card simply signed, "For Sophie, from someone who believes in her mom." Despite the demands of her growing responsibilities, Emily began to feel something she hadn't felt in years: competent, capable, respected. Then one afternoon, just as Emily was finishing a project draft, her phone rang. It was a private number. She hesitated before answering. "Emily Carter?" The voice on the other end was sharp, older, unmistakably cold. "Yes, who's speaking?" "This is Karen Martin, Lucas's mother." Emily froze. That name still made her stomach twist. "I don't know what game you think you're playing, but my son told me everything. You had no right to use our family's ring for your personal sob story." "I didn't use anything," Emily said, her voice tight with restraint. "He left it with me. He left us. You should have returned it. We don't owe you anything." "I wasn't asking for anything." There was silence on the other end, then a quiet scoff. "Of course you were. I saw the article. Your name in connection with Hale & Co. You've attached yourself to a man with power now. How convenient." Emily's heart pounded. "This isn't about that. Nathan offered me a job. I earned it." Karen Martin laughed, bitter and cruel. "Let me be clear. Stay away from our name. Don't drag it into whatever drama you're living. And don't think for a second that child of yours is going to inherit anything from the Martin family." Emily felt the familiar flush of shame and rage rise in her throat. She ended the call without another word, her hands shaking. That night, she couldn't sleep. Sophie lay peacefully nearby, and Emily watched the little girl's chest rise and fall with rhythmic innocence. The idea that someone could look at her daughter and deny her worth made Emily's stomach twist. The next morning, she opened her email to find a new message from Nathan. Subject, lunch? Message, I'm nearby today. Mind if I stop by? No suits, just me. Emily hesitated but typed back quickly, yes, come by after 1. When he arrived, he brought sandwiches and a small bouquet of sunflowers. Emily couldn't help but smile at the gesture. They ate on the tiny balcony while Sophie played inside with her puzzle. Nathan glanced at Emily more than once, like he was trying to read her. You okay? He finally asked. She took a deep breath. I got a call yesterday from Lucas's mother. Nathan's expression darkened. What did she say? Emily looked down at her lap. She called me a liar, accused me of using you, of manipulating this situation. She said my daughter wouldn't get anything from their family and that I had no right to the ring. Nathan was quiet for a moment, then reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small box, sleek, navy, and unmistakably expensive. Then give that one back to them, he said, gently pushing the box toward her. And wear this instead, if you want to. Emily stared at him, stunned. Nathan, it's not what you think, he said quickly. It's not a proposal. Not yet. It's a promise that you're not alone in this anymore. That someone sees you. That Sophie will never grow up thinking she doesn't belong. Her throat tightened. She looked at the box but didn't open it. Instead, she reached across the table and took his hand. You're the first person who ever made me feel like I deserved to stay standing. And I intend to keep you there, he said softly. Inside, Sophie's laughter echoed through the apartment, full and bright. For the first time, Emily didn't feel like she was fighting to survive. She was living. Emily's days began to settle into a rhythm that felt almost like a real life, one she had thought was forever out of reach. Each morning, she walked Sophie to daycare, where her daughter no longer clung to her in fear but ran ahead with a squeal of joy. Then she returned home, brewed coffee in her small kitchen, and logged on to the company portal where real work awaited. Deadlines, spreadsheets, virtual meetings, and the satisfying challenge of solving problems she was now trusted to handle. Nathan's presence in her life grew in small, steady ways. He never pushed, never demanded. Some evenings he would stop by with takeout, and they would talk while Sophie showed off her latest crayon drawings. Other times he would walk them to the park on Saturdays, his suit traded for jeans, his arm loosely draped around Emily's shoulders, the three of them looking like a family to anyone passing by. But beneath the calm surface, Emily could feel something stirring. A question that pulsed just beneath her skin. Was this real? Or was she still in a fragile moment, one storm away from breaking? That question deepened when she received an unexpected letter in the mail. It was thick and formal, the envelope bearing the gold-embossed seal of the Martin family's law firm. Inside was a summons. Lucas had filed for custody. Emily's hands trembled as she read the legal jargon. He hadn't seen Sophie in over 2 years. Hadn't called, hadn't sent a dime. Now he wanted to claim rights to her daughter. She called Nathan immediately. He picked up on the first ring. Lucas is trying to take her, she said, her voice breaking. Take Sophie? His voice dropped, serious and sharp. I'll be right there. When he arrived 20 minutes later, Emily was pacing the living room. She handed him the letter without a word. Nathan read it slowly, his jaw tightening. He's not doing this out of love. He's doing it out of ego, he said. This is retaliation, probably pushed by his mother. Emily nodded, her throat dry. I can't lose her, Nathan. She's my entire world. You won't, he said firmly. Not while I'm breathing. He made a few calls. That same day, he put Emily in touch with a family attorney. Kind, sharp, and with a reputation for being ruthless when it came to protecting single mothers. They began building a case. Witness statements from shelter staff, pediatrician records, employment contracts, and above all, evidence of Lucas's complete absence. Through it all, Emily was terrified. The court date loomed like a shadow, but Nathan never let her feel alone. He sat with her while she signed affidavits. He helped her rehearse for the hearing. He watched Sophie when the stress became too much. One night, after putting Sophie to bed, Emily stood on the balcony, staring out at the stars. Nathan stepped beside her. "I never thought this would be my life," she said quietly. "A courtroom, a custody battle, fighting to prove I deserve to keep my child." He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "You don't have to prove anything to me, but you've already proved everything that matters to her." Emily looked up, and for the first time, she saw more than kindness in his eyes. She saw something deeper, fierce, devoted. "Nathan, I'm here," he said, "for you, for her, no matter what happens next." And in that still moment, with the city glowing around them and Sophie asleep in the next room, Emily felt something settle into place. Not fear, not doubt, but love. Real, solid, terrifying love. And for once, she wasn't afraid of it. The courtroom was colder than Emily expected. Pale walls, hard benches, and fluorescent lights gave the place an eerie quiet, despite the murmurs of voices and the shuffle of papers. Emily sat at the petitioner's table, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, trying to steady the tremor in her fingers. On her left sat her attorney, calm and composed. On her right, Nathan. He didn't speak much, but his presence grounded her. Every time she glanced at him, she saw quiet reassurance in his eyes. Lucas entered 10 minutes late, dressed in an expensive suit that looked borrowed, his hair slicked back, his expression smug. He didn't look at Emily. He didn't even glance toward the photos on the table, the ones of Sophie on her second birthday, laughing with cake smeared on her face. Emily watched him walk in like he was here to close a business deal. When the judge arrived, everything moved quickly. The lawyer representing Lucas opened with claims about his renewed interest in fatherhood and his desire to provide his daughter with stability and resources. Emily listened in stunned silence as Lucas painted himself as a man who had simply been misled and shut out. Then it was her turn. Her lawyer stood, calm and clear. "Your Honor, my client has raised her child alone for the past 2 years. Mr. Martin has provided no financial support, no communication, no visitation. This is not a man seeking fatherhood. This is a man reacting to press attention, to power shifts, and using a child to regain control." Emily took the stand last. Her voice was shaky at first. But as she spoke about Sophie, her sleepless nights, the meals skipped to feed her, the hospital visits managed alone, her voice grew stronger. She wasn't there to attack Lucas. She was there to protect her daughter. When asked if she had support now, she hesitated for a moment, then looked at Nathan. "Yeah," she said quietly, "I do now." The judge called for a recess. The room emptied slowly. Emily stood in the hallway, her breath shallow, her body tight with nerves. Nathan reached for her hand without a word, and she didn't let go. Half an hour later, they were called back. The judge was brief. Custody remains solely with the mother. The petition for shared custody is denied. Visitation to be evaluated at a later date, contingent on proof of sustained responsibility. Emily didn't move at first. Her mind struggled to process the words. When it finally hit her, she exhaled a breath she'd been holding for months, maybe years. Outside the courthouse, Nathan pulled her into a tight embrace. She felt his warmth, the steady beat of his heart, and for the first time her body relaxed completely. "You did it," he whispered. "No," she said softly. "We did." That night, back in the apartment, Emily cooked dinner for the first time in weeks. Nothing fancy, just pasta and garlic bread, but it smelled like home. Sophie ran around the small kitchen, giggling in circles, and Nathan sat at the table, reading her a book between bites. Later, after dishes were cleaned and Sophie was asleep, Emily sat beside Nathan on the couch. The TV flickered softly, but neither of them watched it. "I've been thinking," he said. Oh, he smiled. "Not a proposal. Just, an idea." "I'm listening." "I'm building a new community outreach program through Hale & Co. for women like you. Single moms, shelter residents, displaced workers. I want you to run it." Emily blinked. "Me? You've lived it, survived it. You know better than anyone what they need. Who better to lead?" Her eyes filled with tears. "You really believe in me that much?" "I believe in what you've already done, and in what you're going to do." She nodded slowly, her chest tight with emotion. Then she leaned against him, head on his shoulder. And for the first time since she held Sophie for the very first time and wondered how she'd ever make it through, Emily didn't feel like she was surviving anymore. She felt like she had truly arrived. As the author, I see the ending of this story as a quiet triumph, one born not from fairy tale miracles, but from resilience, truth, and earned second chances. Emily's journey is not about being saved by a man. It's about rediscovering her voice, her dignity, and her ability to fight for the life her daughter deserves. Nathan doesn't swoop in as a hero. He listens. He stands beside her, and he chooses to believe in her when it matters most. The beauty of the ending lies in its realism. It doesn't promise perfection, but it offers hope. Grounded, believable hope. The courtroom didn't just give Emily legal custody. It gave her something deeper, a sense that her pain had a purpose, her strength had value, and her love, steady, messy, unconditional, was more than enough. In the final scene, Emily isn't just a survivor anymore. She's a leader, a mother, a woman building not just a future, but a legacy. And that, in my view, is the most powerful ending of all.